Picture this. On the sunlit banks of the Anacostia River, an architectural marvel begins to take shape. A futuristic, world-class football stadium destined to redefine Washington, District of Columbia's identity. The proposed project, valued at more than $3 billion, aims to do more than simply provide a new home for the Washington Commanders. It promises to spark an economic renaissance, create thousands of jobs, and reinvigorate neglected neighborhoods. But as shovels are poised to break ground and city leaders tout the transformative potential, a single, heated controversy threatens to turn this dream into dust. At the heart of the storm is not just a matter of money or bricks and mortar, but a single, deeply divisive word. How did the destiny of an entire city and the future of American sports become entangled with a decades-old debate over a team's name? To truly grasp the stakes, we need to rewind the clock and understand the saga that brought us here. For nearly 9 decades, Washington's beloved football team was known by a name that, while iconic to some fans, was condemned by many others as a racial slur. The debate over the Redskins moniker simmered for generations, periodically erupting into national controversy. Native American groups, activists, and public intellectuals decried the name as offensive and damaging, while many devoted fans clung to it as a cherished tradition. The argument reached a boiling point in the middle of the year 2020, as a national reckoning on racial justice swept across the United States. Major corporate sponsors, including some of the country's most influential brands, joined the chorus demanding change. Under mounting social and financial pressure, the team's ownership relented. In the summer of 2020, the franchise announced it would retire the controversial name. For 2 seasons, the team played under the unadorned title Washington Football Team, a placeholder that seemed to symbolize an identity in flux. Finally, in early 2022, a new name was unveiled: the Washington Commanders. The announcement was met with mixed reactions. Relief by some, nostalgia, and resentment by others. But it marked a clear break with the past and a step toward a more inclusive future. Yet the change did not settle the matter. Instead, it sparked new debates about tradition, branding, and the power of language in shaping collective identity. Even as the Commanders took the field under their new banner, memories of the old name lingered, visible on vintage jerseys and in the chants of longtime supporters. Meanwhile, their historic home, Robert F. Kennedy Stadium, better known as RFK, stood silent. Once a roaring epicenter of Washington's sports culture, RFK had fallen into disrepair, a relic haunted by memories of championship runs and legendary players. Against this dramatic backdrop, city officials and business leaders began to imagine a bold new future. They envisioned a 65,000-seat domed stadium, equipped with state-of-the-art technology, gleaming amenities, and the potential to host not just football games, but concerts, international soccer matches, conventions, and major cultural events. The proposed project carried a hefty price tag, more than $3.7 billion. But advocates argued it would pay off in the long run, through job creation, increased tax revenue, and a revitalized urban landscape. Mayor Muriel Bowser and members of the city council rallied behind the vision, eager to return the Commanders to the heart of the district and reclaim Washington's status as a major sports capital. But the plan was anything but simple. The site of the old RFK Stadium is not owned by the city, but by the federal government, a legacy of mid-20th century urban planning. Any deal to redevelop the land would require a delicate dance with Congress and, ultimately, the approval of the President of the United States. In late 2023, just as negotiations appeared to be gaining momentum, a powerful new obstacle emerged: former President Donald Trump. In a volley of headline-grabbing social media posts, Trump threatened to block the stadium deal unless the Commanders reverted to their old name. He derided the Commanders moniker as ridiculous, arguing that restoring the Redskins name would boost the team's value and honor its history. Trump's intervention injected a volatile mix of politics and culture war into the already contentious debate. City officials were blindsided. Mayor Bowser pushed back, insisting that the team's name was irrelevant to her support for the deal. Phil Mendelson, chair of the district council, declared that Trump's threats would not affect the council's timeline or decision-making process. "I have heard from not a single district resident complaining about the name change or saying this is an issue in connection with the stadium," Mendelson stated. But the damage was done. The stadium's fate, already precarious, now hung by an even thinner thread. This is more than just a fight over a football team or a corporate rebranding. The stakes are enormous, touching on some of the most profound questions facing American cities today. Who gets to define a community's identity? How should public money be spent, especially when schools are underfunded and neighborhoods are struggling? And what responsibility do sports franchises have to honor the values and history of the communities they represent? To understand the broader context, it helps to consider the long and troubled history of Native American representation in American sports. For much of the 20th century, indigenous imagery and names were used casually by teams, mascots, and fans, often without regard for the real impact on Native people. Dr. Stephanie Freiberg, professor of psychology and a leading expert on Native American representation, explains, Native mascots remind Native people of the limited ways that others see them. They reinforce stereotypes and perpetuate the marginalization of indigenous cultures. Ray Halbritter, representative of the Oneida Indian Nation, is even more direct. The R word is a dictionary-defined racial slur that remains deeply offensive. The persistence of these issues is a reminder that the battles over symbols and language are not merely abstract debates. They have real consequences for real peoples. Psychological studies have shown that exposure to Native American mascots can harm the self-esteem and mental health of indigenous youth, while also shaping the perceptions of non-Native audiences in subtle but damaging ways. According to a 2015 report by the American Psychological Association, the continued use of such mascots undermines the educational experiences of members of all communities, especially those who have had little or no contact with indigenous peoples. The economic stakes are just as high. Supporters of the stadium project argue that a new venue will act as a catalyst for growth, attracting visitors, generating jobs, and revitalizing the neighborhoods around RFK. According to early projections by city officials, construction alone could create more than 20,000 temporary jobs, with thousands more permanent positions in hospitality, retail, and event management. The city anticipates a surge in tax revenue, driven by ticket sales, concessions, and related business activity. Advocates point to examples like SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California, which has hosted the Super Bowl and multiple major concerts since opening in 2020, bringing billions of dollars to the local economy. But skeptics warn that these rosy forecasts rarely pan out. Neil Irwin, senior economic correspondent at Axios, cautions, public funding of stadiums rarely provides a good return on investment for taxpayers. A landmark study by economists at Stanford University found that fewer than 1 in 10 stadium projects funded with public dollars generated net economic benefits for their host cities. Often, the promised jobs are temporary, the tax revenues underwhelm, and the burden of debt crowds out funding for critical services like education, housing, and public safety. This is not just academic theory. Cities across the United States are littered with stadium deals that failed to deliver on their ambitious promises. In Cincinnati, Ohio, the construction of Paul Brown Stadium in the late 1990s was hailed as a turning point for the city's economy. Taxpayers funded the majority of the $900 million cost, but 2 decades later, studies show that the anticipated boom in development and tax revenue never materialized. In Las Vegas, the construction of Allegiant Stadium for the Raiders involved nearly $800 million in public subsidies. While the stadium has attracted major events, critics argue that the economic benefits have been uneven, with many local residents left out of the windfall. Education policy expert Annette Anderson raises a pointed question. How can we justify using public dollars for a stadium when our schools are being shortchanged? In Washington, District of Columbia, disparities in school funding and infrastructure persist, especially in low-income neighborhoods. Community activists argue that the city's priorities are misplaced. Why invest billions in a sports complex when basic services remain underfunded? This tension between economic ambition and social responsibility is echoed by residents like Lisa Marie Griles, who says, the stadium deal should prioritize community benefits over football. Griddles and others are demanding that any stadium agreement include concrete commitments to affordable housing, local hiring, and support for small businesses. Without these provisions, she warns, the project risks becoming another example of top-down development that benefits the few at the expense of the many. Meanwhile, the political stakes continue to escalate. Former President Trump's intervention has transformed the stadium debate into a national flashpoint, drawing attention from media outlets and political commentators across the spectrum. His demand that the team restore its old name is not merely a personal opinion. It is a threat with real teeth, given the federal government's control over the stadium site. Congressional committees responsible for District of Columbia affairs have the power to approve or block major construction projects, and the president's influence looms large. Yet within Washington itself, the reaction to Trump's ultimatum has been mixed at best. Mayor Bowser has made it clear that she will not be swayed by demands to change the team's name. "What I'm concerned about is we haven't done our part," she told reporters. "We need to complete our part so that the team can get to work, so local businesses can get hired, so we can start earning the tax revenue that will come when we deliver the Commanders Stadium." Phil Mendelson, the council chair, emphasized that his focus is on getting the best possible deal for district taxpayers. "We are not going to be pushed into a rushed decision by outside political pressure," he said. As the city council studies the proposal, delays and disagreements persist. Public hearings are packed with residents voicing concerns about displacement, gentrification, and the risk of repeating past mistakes. Some council members have floated the idea of a scaled-down stadium, with fewer seats and a greater emphasis on public amenities, parks, community centers, affordable housing, and small business incubators. Others have suggested tying the stadium's approval to strict requirements for local hiring and living wages. With so many competing interests at play, the future of the Commander Stadium remains uncertain. There are essentially three possible paths forward, each carrying its own risks and rewards. First, the City Council could press ahead and approve the existing deal. If this happens, Washington could soon see a colossal, domed stadium rise where RFK once stood. Construction would likely begin within a year, with the Commanders returning to the city for the first time in decades. The stadium would host not only football games, but a year-round calendar of events, concerts, festivals, college sports, and international soccer matches. Proponents argue that this would re-establish Washington as a premier destination for sports and entertainment, drawing visitors from across the country and even the world. Yet this vision comes at a steep price. More than $1 billion in taxpayer funds, not to mention the risk that the city's financial bet will fail to pay off. As Neil Irwin warns, public funding of stadiums rarely provides a good return on investment. The experience of other cities should serve as a cautionary tale. In St. Louis, Missouri, the closure of the Rams Stadium after the team's relocation left the city saddled with debt and an empty arena. In Detroit, Michigan, the promises of urban revival tied to new stadiums have often failed to materialize for the city's most vulnerable neighborhoods. The second scenario is rejection. If the city council, under pressure from residents or unwilling to bow to presidential demands, votes down the deal, the Commanders may once again look to the suburbs of Maryland or Virginia. Both states have previously explored stadium deals with the team, but these efforts collapsed due to funding shortfalls, political opposition, and, in Virginia's case, environmental concerns related to wetland preservation. A move outside the district could fracture the team's fan base, weaken Washington's cultural identity, and delay the construction of a new stadium for years. On the other hand, it might force city leaders to reconsider their approach to development and prioritize investments that benefit a broader cross-section of residents. The third option is a compromise. This could take many forms: a smaller stadium with fewer seats, a project that includes substantial affordable housing and public amenities, or a deal that ties approval to concrete benchmarks for community investment. Such a compromise might address the concerns of residents like Lisa Marie Griles and win over skeptical council members. However, it would also require the Commanders to accept a less lucrative arrangement and potentially limit their ability to compete with franchises in cities like Dallas, Los Angeles, or New York. None of these options is without risks. Even if the stadium is built, there is no guarantee that the anticipated economic boom will materialize. Sports business consultant Mark Gannis warns that the economic impact of stadiums is often overstated. Studies by the Brookings Institution and the Urban Institute have found that stadium-led development often fails to deliver lasting benefits, especially for low-income communities. Instead, the construction of high-priced venues can accelerate gentrification, displace long-term residents, and increase the cost of living in surrounding neighborhoods. For Washington, the stakes are especially high. The city is still grappling with the legacy of urban renewal projects in the mid-20th century, which often resulted in the displacement of Black communities and the erosion of local culture. Many residents are wary of repeating these mistakes, insisting that any new stadium must be part of a broader strategy for inclusive growth. So what practical lessons can viewers in other cities take from Washington's stadium saga? If your city is considering a mega project, whether a stadium, arena, or large-scale infrastructure investment, ask the tough questions. Who are the real beneficiaries? Are the promised jobs permanent or short-term? Will the project deliver on its commitments to affordable housing, transportation, and community development? Are the voices of residents genuinely being heard in the process? Transparency, accountability, and community input are essential to ensure that such investments serve the public good rather than enriching a select few. The Commander Stadium debate also offers a vivid lesson in how social justice concerns can become intertwined with economic and political decisions. The team's name change was not just a gesture. It was a response to decades of activism and a broader movement toward respect and dignity for marginalized communities. The backlash against the new name and the political maneuvering that followed illustrate how deeply cultural symbols matter in American life. As Dr. Stephanie Freiberg reminds us, Native mascots remind Native people of the limited ways that others see them. These debates ripple far beyond the boundaries of sport, shaping how we think about identity, history, and justice. In the end, the fate of the Commanders Stadium remains undecided. The City Council holds the keys, but so do residents, taxpayers, and, uniquely, the President. This saga is a microcosm of the larger tensions shaping American cities: tradition versus progress, private gain versus public good, and the enduring struggle to reconcile economic ambition with social responsibility. And here's a crucial fact that often goes overlooked. According to sports economists, fewer than 1 in 10 public stadium deals across the United States deliver real net benefits to their host cities. The overwhelming majority fall short of their lofty promises, leaving taxpayers on the hook for decades. The lesson is clear. Demand transparency, scrutinize the numbers, and remember that sometimes the biggest plays happen off the field, in city halls and council chambers, far from the roar of the crowd. So what do you think? Should Washington move forward with the stadium or invest those billions elsewhere? Should the team embrace its new identity, or does tradition deserve a second chance? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this deep dive valuable, hit the like button, subscribe for more explorations at the intersection of economics, technology, and culture, and keep asking the tough questions in your own community. Thanks for watching, and remember, every